invites invites us to challenge our outdated beliefs about aging and to rethink the negative stories we tell ourselves and each other about growing older. Bear in mind, much of this is examining how we've historically talked about age and aging as a society. As you'll see later in our discussion, the impact of ageism is quite real and can affect us whether we are 25 or 75. Because of this, we believe that everyone has a stake in understanding and addressing ageism to create a more equitable future for all. We have a lot to cover today and hopefully a lot of minds to change. So let me review what it is I hope to leave you with today. I hope you will begin to have an understanding of the demographic trends in aging and the longevity economy. I hope you'll be able to notice the signs of everyday ageism, recognize everyone as multidimensional individuals, and identify opportunities to combat ageism and live your best life. We're going to get started by looking at demographic trends in aging and lifespans in how the United States has changed. Keep in mind that these trends are based on the United States population as a whole and not our particular state or region. When we talk about the longevity economy, we're referring to the fact that as people live longer and healthier lives, they are contributing to their communities and fueling economic growth well past the retirement age, and in fact, redefining the concept of retirement. The contributions of people 50 and over benefit society and Americans of all ages. Growing numbers of older adults work, pay taxes, support the job market, give time and money to charitable causes, and provide caregiving support to family and friends. By way of illustration, this graph shows the aging trend and how lifespans are becoming longer over time on a national level. We're looking at the years from 1900 all the way to the projected growth through the year 2060. The bars show the number of people ages 65 and older in millions. In 1900, we had about 3 million people over the age of 65, or about 4% of the population. By 2060, those 65 and older are projected to number almost 95 million people, or 23% of the overall population. Now we can see how the life expectancy has changed over time. In 1900, it was 47 years, increasing to 70 by 1960 and 80 by 2020. According to projections, life expectancy will increase another 6 years to 86 by 2060, which is longer than ever before. And think about this, if you will. Social scientists project that a 10-year-old child in the United States today may have an almost 50% chance of living 100 years or more. Now, you may be wondering about the impact of the pandemic. 2020 census estimates include the impact of COVID-19 showed a decline of about a year. More recent estimates show a decline of closer to 3 years on average. Historically, the United States has experienced periods of decline in life expectancy related to major events like pandemics and conflicts. But as you can see here, the overall upwards trend has held, and we expect it will continue to increase over time. Now let's examine how this growth is distributed across the United States on a broad scale. This slide is a little busy, but just have a sense of the shades of blue. The darker the blue shading, the higher the percentage of people age 65 and older in those areas. The bigger the red dot, the higher the number of people age 65 and older in those communities. Let's fast forward to 2025 and see how this map changes. In 2025, we can see a much deeper blue across most of the country and growth in the size of the red dots. This shows that both the percentage and number of individuals 65 and older are projected to increase in every state. That's really great. And now that we've explored trends in longevity, you might be wondering how a growing proportion of adults impacts the economy. Despite some common thinking that frames older generations as a drain on society, the facts reveal a very different reality. Individuals are working longer and spending more than ever before as they age. Let's take a look at how those over the age of 50 are driving significant economic growth. The 50-plus population drives a substantial proportion of the United States economy through their spending, work, and tax payments. A recent AARP report on the longevity economy revealed that this group drove a whopping $8.3 trillion in economic activity in 2018. That's equivalent to 40% of the 2018 gross domestic product, or GDP. As we look to the future, projections show this trend accelerating in the coming years. By 2050, that number will more than triple to 26.8 million. Keep in mind that this age group represents only 35% of the overall population, so they are contributing more than their share of economic growth while driving job creation and wage growth for all generations. So let's take a look at how we're spending money. Spending by people over the age of 50 amounted to $7.6 trillion, or 56 cents of every dollar spent. Remember that this group represents just 35% of the population. And like the trends we've examined thus far, it is projected to grow to $27.5 trillion by the year 2050, which would be 61% of every dollar spent. So let's talk now about contributions. Those who are volunteers and caregivers are providing a critical unpaid function that helps strengthen families and communities across the country. Those contributions are valued at $745 billion. It is a common misperception that people over the age of 50 in the United States are primarily recipients of care rather than providing care to others, but this could not be more wrong. In fact, recent estimates show that more than half of this age group are caregivers to someone over 65 years of age, and millions of grandparents are responsible for their grandchildren. Older adults also make an outsized contribution as volunteers in their community, representing 55% of the total value. Beyond spending time as volunteers, those over the age of 50 are generous with their income. On average, these individuals donated $1,400 each, totaling $97 billion in charitable contributions in 2018. That is equivalent to 1/3 of all charitable donations. I hope you can see why an aging population is far from a drain on society. In fact, looking at the economic impact, it's hard not to see opportunities to innovate to meet the needs of this growing age group. But despite the lengthening of lifespans and the evident contributions of older generations, we often make broad assumptions about people based on the sole factor of the number of years lived. This brings us to the next topic, ageism. Let's talk about what it means, what it looks like day to day, and how it profoundly impacts us as individuals and collectively as a society. By definition, ageism is the process of systematic stereotyping or discrimination against people because of their age. Dr. Robert Butler coined the term in 1968, bringing ageism into the conversation alongside other forms of discrimination like sexism and racism. Ageism can come in many forms, from passing comments to diminished earnings resulting from bias in the workplace, and can impact us whether we are older or younger. When we make assumptions based on someone's age, we are devaluing their experience, perpetuating stereotypes, and missing out on opportunities for multi-generational connection. While ageism can impact you at any age, Stereotyping those over 50 is much more common versus those under 50. Let's talk about some examples of what ageism looks like in our daily lives by starting broadly with media and advertising. We consume images every day, consciously and unconsciously. Media is often thought to reflect societal norms. It can also influence us as we form our own beliefs. So let's take a step back and think about how older people are commonly portrayed. First, if you sense that older people are underrepresented in media, you're correct. And when images do feature older individuals, those portrayals skew more negatively than those of younger individuals. For example, individuals may be represented with gray hair and exaggerate their physical frailties. While 46% of the United States adult population is over the age of 50, only 15% of images containing adults include people this age. Or they may show older individuals as dependent and disconnected, and often receiving care from someone younger. Adults over the age of 50 appear apart from the integrated hustle and bustle of the under 50 crowd. Doesn't quite sound like the same vibrant group that is driving economic growth as part of the longevity economy. So now let's talk about one of the not so obvious ways we as individuals may experience or even unknowingly perpetuate ageism, and one that we have complete control over, and that is language. Words matter. Looking at the left side of the screen for a moment, think about how you might reframe these statements. You look great for your age. It's fantastic that he's still working. Can I help you, young lady? On the right side, we see some statements that might be directed to a younger person. You're so accomplished for your age. She's wise beyond her years. You're so mature for your generation. Of course, a younger person can be accomplished, wise, or mature, full stop. Think about how you might reframe each of these comments. You look great. It's fantastic that he's working. Can I help you? You're so accomplished. She's wise. You're so mature. There really is no need to diminish a compliment by adding a qualifier about age. Paying attention to the words we choose is a simple but incredibly important action everyone can take. Now that we've identified some common examples of ageism in society, let's turn to the workplace. With 5 generations at work, today's workforce is more age diverse than ever. But how often do we associate age as one of the measures of diversity and inclusion? Data reveal that diverse teams are stronger teams that deliver better results, not to mention earnings, and that includes age diversity. As we move through this section, remember that all of us will get older, and therefore all of us will benefit from addressing age discrimination. Ed McCain-Williams, the Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer of AARP, has been quoted as saying, "We must break down the barriers that are in the way of meaningful aging. Structural racism and ageism are 2 of those barriers." According to an AARP study in 2018, workplace discrimination against Americans aged 50 and over cost the economy $850 billion. That's far more than Switzerland's entire economy during the same year. And behind the data, there is the significant impact on real people. Individual older workers can experience negative outcomes in the form of involuntary retirement, underemployment, and unemployment. Imagine what we would gain by proactively examining hiring practice and workplace policies. More of those over 50 in the workplace, wage growth opportunities, less time looking for work. However, if things continue as they are, age discrimination could grow to cost the United States more than $3.9 trillion in 2050. These data are helpful in understanding the overall cost, but it's also important to understand what forms age discrimination can take in the workplace. Here is what older workers said about their experience in the workplace since turning 40. 31% said, I've heard negative remarks about an older coworker's age. I did not get hired for a job I applied for because of my age. 24% said, I've heard negative remarks related to my age from a colleague. And 22%, I was passed up for a promotion because of my age. The good news is that workers in age-inclusive environments report high levels of job satisfaction. Just imagine how many more individuals and organizations would benefit from this approach. Which brings us to the next topic, recognizing adults as multidimensional individuals. Individuals of every age are complex and unique in their experiences, preferences, and passions. We often have more in common with those much younger or older than we might think. When we recognize everyone as multidimensional, it opens a world of opportunities to learn from, share, and connect with others. We've talked about their contributions to the community and the society broadly, but on an individual level, older adults learn, explore, and create. They start businesses, manage households, volunteer, mentor, and care for others. They have hobbies and pursue lifelong learning. Joanne Jenkins has said that it's important to reimagine the aging process as a time of a discovery rather than decline, which I think really resonates. So let's disrupt a few more myths, shall we? Think for a minute about the answers to these two questions. What percentage of people 65 and over are in nursing homes? And what is the average age of a successful startup? So I hear all of you thinking, but I'm going to give you the answer. Only 2% of people over the age of 65 and over are in nursing homes. There's a common assumption that most older adults require constant care, but only 2% of those over the age of 65 are in nursing homes. And don't forget that older adults perform billions worth of unpaid caregiving activities. Similarly, the age of a successful startup founder might surprise you. That is the age of 45. According to the Harvard Business Review, the average age of founders leading the highest performing startups was 45. The average age of startup founders, regardless of performance, was 42. That same study shows that the likelihood of success increases with a founder's age until the age of 60. So a 50-year-old founder is twice as likely as someone 20 years their junior to build a thriving enterprise. Unlike the ageist portrayals of older people we discussed earlier, in reality, there is nothing flat or one-dimensional about anybody at any age. The more we can learn from those of different ages, life stages, and experiences, the more we can really see and appreciate the multidimensionality in one another. So let's revisit the workplace with a lens on multidimensionality. The headline here is that the majority of people in the workforce value diversity in the workplace. Specifically, they like working with individuals of generations other than their own and feel that both younger and older workers enhance the workplace environment. AARP recently asked workers to share their perspectives on their older or younger coworkers, and this is what they said. They found that younger workers value those older for their skill as teachers, for the opportunity to consider a different perspective, for making the workplace more productive. And older workers value the opportunity to pass on skills and knowledge, to teach. They value the creativity of their younger colleagues that are brought to the workplace by them. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about the intergenerational connections beyond the workplace. Social connections, including friendships, are important at every stage of life and are shown to have a positive impact on your health and psychological well-being. 4 in 10 adults report having at least one intergenerational friendship, and those relationships help us feel valued, find joy, maintain a healthy lifestyle, and lessen isolation and feelings of loneliness. In short, they make us feel relevant, which is really very important as we age. In this last section, we're going to reveal why a positive perspective on aging is actually good for your health. We'll also discuss potential actions that we can take to combat ageism, and create meaningful change. First, the great news. Combating ageism is good for everyone, but it's also good for your health. People with positive perceptions about aging when they're young will live an average 7.5 years longer than those who have negative perceptions about aging when they're young. Perceptions about how you age can impact how you age. Those with positive perceptions of aging also experience much higher rates of recovery from illness and injury, have a better memory, have a greater sense of control over their lives, and a greater will to live. They are also more likely to talk to a doctor about health problems, get preventive care such as blood pressure screenings and flu shots, and pursue health promotion programs. In short, a positive attitude towards aging is a healthy one. Here's what those over the age of 50 had to say about their specific aging journey. 88% feel more comfortable being themselves. 80% said they have a strong sense of purpose. 67% said their feelings about aging have become more positive. And 65% that said their life is better than they thought it would be. And many are taking action to protect their independence as they age by retaining mobility, cognitive health, and the ability to connect with others. In fact, those 60 and over are more likely than those under 40 to report their health as being excellent or very good. So now that you've learned about the benefits of a positive outlook on aging, let's take a look at some of the takeaways from today in terms of actions you can take to be a force from change. They are to share what you've learned about positive trends in aging with others. Seek out meaningful intergenerational connections and understanding when you can. Learn to identify and challenge ageist stereotypes. And finally, identify opportunities to change the conversation in your circle of influence. I hope, if nothing else, you'll be able to say that today's presentation has hopefully made you feel a little bit better about the age you are today. I appreciate your time and attention. And that concludes our PowerPoint presentation for today. And I'm happy to take questions through the chat. And people are welcome to turn on their video if they'd like. The PowerPoint is over. Any questions? There is a question from Gail. Will these slides be sent out? Eleanor says yes. Sandy has a question. Are corporations seeing these stats? Is Eleanor, are you still on the line? It's a good question, Sandy. I'm not familiar with the extent to which this information is actually proactively sent out to corporations, but I imagine the information is available to them through AARP. How to change media's presentation to older adults? That's a good question. You know, for those of us that are still watching network TV and have to suffer through, not suffer through, but see commercials, you will notice that we are being featured prominently in a lot of the pharmaceutical commercials, and in all fairness, are being represented as vibrant, riding bikes and playing sports. And so perhaps the message is really getting out. It really depends on what it is they're marketing. And I think the media is beginning to understand that we are a significant group that really drives the economy. So I think that may begin to change, but I must say that I am beginning to see older people being represented in a more positive light. Yes, and Gail, you had a question. Is Disrupt Aging part of AARP's age-friendly community work? Yes, and I think Eleanor has put a link in the chat. Hopefully that'll be helpful. Eleanor has also put in the chat the website for AARP Maryland. If you're not in Maryland, I'm sure there's a website that's similar in your particular state. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we can probably wrap it up. Oh. Oh, here's a question about uh, talking. Yes. So if you go to so Gail has a question about getting speakers to come. If you go to the AARP Maryland website, and in there is a link to the Speakers Bureau. There is a process by which requests are made. They get back to Eleanor. She looks out. So the simple answer is yes. Either myself or one of my colleagues could be available to give the Disrupt Aging in your community in person to a group. Yes, Sandra, I would agree. You do have the power. Sometimes the gray hair acts in our to our favor. The people do admire, I think, I think times are changing. I think that we're being rewarded for wisdom, not so much knowledge. And so we're certainly in a information overload kind of environment. But what I'm finding is that lots of people have a lot of information, but they don't necessarily have the wisdom to apply that information to a certain circumstance. And I think those of a certain age have life experiences to be able to say, yes, that's what the information says, but what do you do with that? How do you leverage that in an important way? And so, yeah, I would agree. Eleanor, a question for you. Can you talk about the AARP age-friendly community work? Hmm. I'm not sure. Eleanor, can you hear me? Hmm. Ah, okay. Kathy, if you're still in the chat, you may see Gail Lovelace's comment. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, everybody, I think that might be it.
Actually,
All right.
I just wanted to mention, I thought in the comments that there's an interesting comment about a woman who lives in an active 55 plus community that also they have to deal with ageism as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has no limit. Again, it affects you whether you're 25 or 75. Either you're too young for a job or you're too old for a job. People really do have misperceptions on either end, and it really requires us all rethinking again the multidimensionality. If you've seen one 75-year-old, you've seen one 75-year-old, and it's really not appropriate to